When someone expects you to chase them, it's because they've already calculated your response in their mind. They believe they know your next move. They assume you'll act out of fear of losing them, and they expect you to compromise your dignity just to keep their attention. But the truth is, the most powerful decision you can ever make in that moment is to walk away. Walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is the greatest sign of strength. It shows that your sense of value is not tied to whether someone stays or goes. It shows that you are not afraid to be alone, because you understand that being alone is far better than being with someone who takes your worth for granted. Think about this carefully. When you chase someone, you give them the power to control the pace, the direction, and the outcome of the relationship. You put yourself in the position of the pursuer, while they play the role of the one who decides whether to grant or deny you the attention you're seeking. That imbalance is dangerous because it places your sense of happiness in their hands. When you walk away instead, you take all that power back. You reclaim control over your emotions, your peace of mind, and your future. Walking away is not running from them, it is running toward yourself. When you walk away, you send a message without ever having to say a word. You communicate that you are not desperate, that your life does not revolve around someone else's decision to stay or go, and that you are capable of building a fulfilling life on your own terms. The silence of your absence becomes louder than the noise of your words could ever be. People hear it in the stillness. They feel it in the space you leave behind. And often, it shakes them more than any argument, any begging, or any chasing ever could. Walking away requires courage. It requires a deep understanding of your own worth, because the temptation to chase is strong. Human beings are wired to want closure, to want answers, to want reassurance that we are not being discarded. But here's the reality: closure is rarely found in someone else's words. True closure comes when you decide you no longer need their validation to feel whole. Walking away is choosing your own closure. It's standing up and saying, I do not need you to tell me what I'm worth. I already know. That's why the moment you walk away, you rise to a level of power that most people never reach in their lifetime. Consider how much energy is wasted chasing people who have already shown us through their actions that they don't value us. Every text sent, every call made, every effort to explain is a withdrawal from your self-respect account. And the more you withdraw, the emptier you feel. Walking away is like stopping the leak. It is sealing up the account and deciding that from now on, your energy will only be invested in places where it multiplies instead of diminishes. You can't build a future on the quicksand of chasing, but you can build a fortress on the solid ground of self-respect. And here's something important. Walking away doesn't just free you, it exposes them. Because the moment you refuse to play the game of chasing, they are left with only themselves. They are forced to face the reality that they are not as irresistible as they thought. They are forced to recognize that not everyone will bend, not everyone will beg, not everyone will sacrifice their self-worth just to keep them around. Walking away flips the script. It places them in the uncomfortable position of realizing they might lose you forever. And it was their own actions that caused it. When you make walking away your choice, you are not only protecting your self-respect, you are also teaching others how to treat you. You're saying, if you cannot meet me with respect, then you cannot have access to me. And this principle extends far beyond romantic relationships. It applies to friendships, family dynamics, business partnerships, and every area of life. Walking away is a universal demonstration of self-respect. It is a silent standard that says, my peace is priceless, and if being connected to you costs me that peace, then I choose myself. Walking away also has a transformative effect on your inner self. It teaches you patience, it builds your strength, and it deepens your connection to who you really are. Because when you walk away, you're not just leaving them. You're walking toward a version of yourself that no longer tolerates disrespect, confusion, or manipulation. You're stepping into a new level of confidence where your happiness is no longer contingent on how someone else treats you. Walking away gives you back your time, your energy, and your freedom. It allows you to focus on building your dreams instead of being trapped in the cycle of chasing someone who doesn't see your value. Every time you walk away from something or someone that doesn't honor your worth, you train your mind to value yourself more. You strengthen the belief that you deserve better, and with every step, you align yourself with people, opportunities, and experiences that reflect your true value. It is not easy, but it is necessary, because walking away is not about pride, it is about principle. It is not about punishing them, it is about protecting you. It is not about pretending you don't care. It is about proving to yourself that you care enough about your own peace to let go of anything that threatens it. When you pull your energy away from someone who doesn't value you, it's not just about disappearing, it's about redirecting. Energy is one of the most precious resources you have. Every thought, every emotion, every action is an investment of energy. The problem is that when you keep pouring that energy into someone who takes you for granted, you're draining yourself for nothing in return. It's like pouring water into a cup with holes at the bottom. No matter how much you give, it never fills. That's why disappearing, withdrawing, and stepping back isn't an act of weakness. It's an act of wisdom. You recognize that your energy is too valuable to be wasted on someone who doesn't know how to hold it. Think of how powerful energy truly is. It shapes the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you act. If your energy is consumed by chasing after someone's attention, then all of your creativity, focus, and drive get tied up in their approval. But the moment you redirect that energy back toward yourself, everything begins to shift. Instead of wondering why they don't call, you're putting that energy into building yourself. Instead of replaying conversations in your mind, you're pouring that energy into your goals, your growth, your future. And suddenly the same energy that once kept you stuck begins to move you forward. This is the beauty of energy, eh? It never disappears, it only transfers. The energy you once wasted trying to convince someone of your worth can now be used to convince yourself of your own greatness. The hours you spent waiting for a reply can now be spent developing your skills, nurturing your health, or deepening your peace. You begin to see that what felt like a loss was actually a redirection. You didn't lose, you simply stopped investing in the wrong account. You closed the door to a space that drained you, and you opened the door to a space that fills you. Redirected energy has a multiplying effect. When you take what was once scattered on someone who didn't care and channel it into yourself, you grow, you gain momentum, you discover new strength and clarity. People notice the change in you because energy is visible. It shows up in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak, in the confidence that radiates from your presence. You stop being someone who is chasing and start becoming someone who is attracting. And attraction is far more powerful than pursuit. Every time you choose to redirect your energy, you're creating a new story about who you are. You're telling yourself that you matter, that your time matters, that your presence is not something to be thrown away cheaply. The energy you pour into yourself becomes the foundation for everything you will build in the future. It's in your habits, your routines, your discipline, your mindset. And the more you invest in those things, the more unstoppable you become. Think about how many people stay trapped in cycles of chasing because they don't understand the value of their energy. They keep pouring and pouring, thinking that if they give just a little more, they will finally be noticed, finally be appreciated. But what they don't realize is that the person on the other side has already made up their mind. And the more energy you give away, the less of yourself you have left. That's why disappearing and pulling back is not just about teaching someone else a lesson. It's about teaching yourself one. You teach yourself that your energy is not free. It is earned. It is reserved for people, projects, and purposes that honor it. Redirecting your energy is also a spiritual shift. It realigns you with your own inner power. You begin to see that peace of mind is worth more than anyone's attention, that growth is worth more than temporary validation, and that self-respect is worth more than any fleeting relationship. You realize that you can no longer afford to spend your energy begging for crumbs when you are capable of baking the whole bread. You start living with intention, and that intention shapes the direction of your life. The moment you stop giving your energy to people who don't care, you notice how much lighter you feel. You notice that your mind is clearer, your heart is calmer, and your spirit is stronger. You begin to feel a sense of freedom because now your energy belongs to you again. You don't wake up drained. You don't go to bed anxious. And you don't spend your days wondering what someone else is thinking. You spend that time pouring into yourself. And that energy doesn't just stay with you, it creates ripples. It inspires others, it opens doors, it attracts opportunities. Because energy, when focused inward, becomes magnetic outward. Redirecting your energy also reveals who you really are when you're not defined by someone else's presence. It gives you the space to rediscover your passions, your strengths, your dreams. It allows you to create instead of chase, to grow instead of beg, to thrive instead of survive. This is what happens when you stop leaking energy on someone who doesn't value you. You suddenly realize how powerful you are, how much you can accomplish, and how much peace you can experience when you protect where your energy flows. And what often surprises people is how the very moment you redirect your energy, those who once expected you to chase begin to notice the difference. They begin to feel the absence of your energy. Because energy leaves a mark, they begin to realize that the attention they took for granted is no longer available. But by then, you've already discovered something greater. You don't need them to feel complete. You don't need them to validate your worth. Your energy is now your own, and that is the most powerful position you can be in. When you disappear, when you stop chasing, when you stop giving constant access to yourself, something profound happens. Your value increases. Human nature has always been wired to recognize the worth of something that is scarce. If something is always available, always present, always within reach, the mind begins to take it for granted. It doesn't mean you are less valuable. It means familiarity has dulled their awareness of your worth. But the moment you step back, the moment you create distance, the moment you stop feeding them unlimited access to your energy and presence, scarcity begins to take effect. And suddenly the same person who overlooked you starts to notice the void you've left behind. Scarcity creates value because it awakens appreciation. Think about the things in life that are considered precious gold, diamonds, rare works of art. They are not valuable simply because they exist. They are valuable because they are rare, because they cannot be found everywhere, because they are not handed out freely to anyone who asks. When you place yourself in that same category by disappearing and not making yourself endlessly available, you naturally increase the weight of your presence. People begin to see that access to you is not guaranteed, and that realization forces them to reassess how they view you. When someone assumes you will always be there, they stop trying, they stop giving effort, they stop respecting your time, they stop honoring your presence. But when you step away, you break that assumption. They start to feel what life is like without you, and absence always sharpens awareness. Your absence highlights every small thing they once ignored. The jokes, the conversations, the comfort of knowing you were always reachable, all those things begin to feel like luxuries that they no longer have. What once felt ordinary becomes special because it is no longer available. That's the paradox of human nature. We rarely recognize the treasure in our hands until it's gone. Scarcity also creates pursuit. When you are always chasing, the other person holds the power, but when you disappear, the roles shift. They are now left with a choice: either pursue you or lose you. And often, the moment they realize your presence is not something to be taken lightly, they feel an urge to chase, to reach out, to reconnect. It is not manipulation. It is simply the natural response to scarcity. People want what they can no longer easily have. By pulling back, you become the prize, the standard, the rare presence that cannot be duplicated. It's important to understand that scarcity doesn't mean playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It means living in such a way that your energy, your time, and your attention are not cheap. It means you don't give them away to anyone who doesn't earn them. It means you value yourself enough to step back when you are being undervalued. And because you've chosen to disappear instead of chase, you've now placed yourself in a position where your presence carries more weight when you return. Or if you allow them to return, they know it is not to be taken for granted again. Think of how the human mind responds to abundance. When something is too available, it becomes invisible. Water is the most essential resource for survival, yet people in places where it flows freely often waste it without a thought. Meanwhile, in places where water is scarce, every drop is treasured. The same principle applies to relationships. If you are constantly chasing, constantly giving, constantly proving, then your presence becomes like air. Important, yes, but unnoticed because it is always there. When you disappear, you shift from air to gold. Suddenly, your presence feels like a rare gift, and people start to understand its true weight. This principle of scarcity also teaches discipline. It reminds you that your worth is not dependent on how much you give, but on how wisely you choose to give. If you are selective with your time, if you guard your energy, if you choose not to make yourself endlessly available, you automatically increase your value in the eyes of others. They see that access to you is a privilege, not a right. They begin to understand that your presence has a cost, and that cost is respect, effort, and reciprocity. Without those things, they don't get access. Scarcity also creates reflection. When you disappear, the silence forces the other person to think. They are left with the space to analyze their own behavior, to consider the mistakes they made, to confront the reality of what they've lost. This reflection often stirs feelings they didn't expect: regret, longing, even guilt. They start to replay the moments when they had you close but didn't appreciate it. They realize that they could have done more, that they should have done more, and that awareness only grows stronger with your absence. Your disappearance becomes the mirror that shows them what they failed to value. And while scarcity creates value in the eyes of others, it also strengthens your own perception of yourself. When you choose to disappear instead of chase, you remind yourself that you are not ordinary, you are not replaceable, you are not someone who can be treated carelessly. You remind yourself that your presence is powerful, that your energy is rare, and that your worth is beyond measure. You begin to carry yourself differently, with a sense of quiet confidence, because you know you no longer operate from desperation. You operate from discipline. Scarcity elevates everything. It elevates how others see you. It elevates how you see yourself, and it elevates the standards you set for anyone who wants access to your life. By disappearing instead of chasing, you teach others and yourself a profound truth. Your value does not decrease when someone fails to recognize it, but their recognition of it increases the moment they no longer have it. Respect is not something you demand through words. It is something you establish through action, boundaries, and self-control. When someone expects you to chase them and you choose instead to disappear, you are making one of the clearest statements possible. Respect is the standard, not an option. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to argue. You don't need to beg for them to treat you with value. By walking away, you create a living demonstration of what you will and will not tolerate. This silent standard communicates louder than any confrontation could, because people believe actions more than they believe words. When you decide that you will not participate in games, when you choose to stop running after someone who only wants to be pursued, you reclaim your own dignity. You show that you understand your worth deeply enough to refuse disrespect in any form. Respect is not about making someone else see you as valuable. It's about holding yourself to the truth that you already are. If someone cannot see that, then your choice to disappear is simply you honoring yourself enough to leave the space they no longer deserve to occupy. Respect begins with you. If you don't respect your own time, your own heart, your own peace of mind, you leave the door wide open for others to misuse it. But the moment you step back, you send the message, I value myself too much to remain where I am not valued. The dynamic of respect shifts the entire relationship. When you chase, you lower your standard. You are essentially saying, even though you treat me with less than I deserve, I am willing to accept it as long as you don't leave. That posture erodes your self-respect because it trades dignity for attention. But when you disappear, you reverse the equation. You say, attention without respect means nothing to me. That's when people start to notice the difference between someone who is desperate for love and someone who requires respect as the foundation of it. And make no mistake, the latter is always more powerful. Respect is also tied to boundaries. A person who respects themselves has invisible lines that cannot be crossed. They do not need to explain these lines over and over because they are evident through behavior. If someone ignores you, disrespects your presence, or tries to play with your emotions, the way you respond tells them exactly where the line is. By disappearing, you show that the line has been crossed and that you are not willing to negotiate your worth. This level of self-discipline forces others to think twice because they now understand that your presence is conditional. It depends on whether or not they uphold the respect that is due. Another element of respect is understanding the difference between being wanted and being valued. Many people want attention, but not everyone is willing to value the person giving it. They want to feel desired, to feel pursued, but they don't necessarily honor the one doing the pursuing. If you give into that dynamic, you may feel temporarily needed, but you will never feel truly respected. That is why choosing to disappear is so critical. It separates you from the illusion of being wanted and points you back toward the truth of being valued. Only those who respect you will truly value you, and only those who value you deserve your presence. Respect is also not something you can negotiate through pressure. The more you chase, the more you beg. The more you try to prove your worth, the less respect you command. Respect is not about convincing. It's about commanding silently through the way you carry yourself. You cannot force someone to respect you, but you can refuse to allow yourself to remain where it is absent. That refusal is often the only language some people understand. The moment you withdraw, the moment you stop playing along, the moment you disappear, they are forced to face the weight of what they lost. And many times, that is the first moment they begin to truly respect you, because respect often follows the recognition of loss. It's also important to understand that respect is not only external, it's internal. When you hold yourself accountable to your own worth, when you demand higher standards from yourself, when you refuse to accept less than you deserve, your entire aura changes. People can sense it. You don't even have to explain it. They can feel that you are not someone who will tolerate games, disrespect, or inconsistency. They recognize it in your silence, in your absence, in your ability to walk away. That kind of internal respect builds a shield around you, making it harder for others to mishandle you. In every relationship, whether romantic, family, friendship, or business, respect is the cornerstone. Without it, everything else crumbles. You can have affection, but without respect, it will not last. You can have attraction, but without respect, it will eventually fade. You can have connection, but without respect, it will turn into manipulation. That is why the choice to disappear when respect is absent is not just wise, it is necessary. It protects you from building your life on a weak foundation. It ensures that the people who remain in your life are not there out of convenience, but out of genuine respect for who you are. When you embody respect, you stop chasing after people who play games with your emotions, and instead you allow those who value you to come forward. You no longer waste your time trying to convince the wrong ones of your worth, because you know the right ones will never need convincing. Your silence becomes your standard, Your absence becomes your lesson, and your decision to disappear becomes the ultimate proof that respect is the minimum requirement for access to your life. Silence is one of the most underestimated forms of communication, yet it is also one of the most powerful. When someone expects you to react, to explain, to argue, to chase, and instead you respond with silence, you shift the entire dynamic of control. Words can be debated, twisted, ignored, or dismissed, but silence cannot be manipulated. Silence forces the other person to sit with themselves, to face their own thoughts, to wrestle with the reality of your absence of response. It is the kind of answer that echoes louder than any speech you could give. When you choose silence instead of chasing, you remove the very fuel that the other person may have been using to keep you hooked. Many people thrive on reaction. They thrive on knowing that they can push your buttons, that they can trigger you, that they can pull you into a cycle of constant explanation and justification. Every word you say becomes a rope tying you tighter to their control. But when you give them silence, the rope is cut. Suddenly, they are no longer in charge of the rhythm. They are left without the reaction they depended on, and that absence unsettles them more than anger or tears ever could. Silence communicates strength. It shows that you do not need to fight for recognition, that you do not need to justify your worth, that you are not desperate to be heard. It is a stance of confidence that says, my value is not up for debate. Silence is not emptiness, it is restraint. It is the conscious decision to withhold energy from a battle that does not deserve your presence. And in that restraint, there is incredible power. Because when you are silent, you are no longer playing their game. You are setting the rules. Think of how uncomfortable silence can make people. A few seconds of silence in a conversation can feel heavy. A few minutes of silence can feel unbearable. When you disappear into silence instead of chasing, you create that same weight. The other person begins to feel the absence of your words, the absence of your presence, and that void becomes a mirror. It reflects their actions back to them in a way they cannot escape. They begin to question themselves, to replay their choices, to wonder why you are no longer responding. Silence makes them confront their own behavior, because there is nothing from you to distract them anymore. Silence is also protection. When emotions are high, words can become weapons. Once spoken, they cannot be taken back, and they often do more harm than good. Silence, however, shields you from saying things you might regret. It prevents escalation. It preserves your dignity. By remaining silent, you rise above the noise. You choose not to match disrespect with desperation, not to meet manipulation with argument, but instead to elevate yourself by removing your voice entirely from the chaos. That is where true control lies. Not in overpowering the other with words, but in refusing to waste words where they will not be valued. There is also a mysterious quality to silence. People are naturally curious about what is unsaid. When you explain yourself, you give them answers. When you argue, you give them clarity. But when you are silent, you give them nothing. And that nothing drives them deeper into reflection. They wonder what you are thinking, how you are feeling, what you are planning. They are left to fill in the blanks, and those blanks often weigh heavier than anything you could have told them. Silence leaves room for imagination, and imagination magnifies the impact of your absence. Silence has a way of shifting the focus back onto you. When you no longer chase, when you no longer explain, when you no longer respond, the energy that once flowed outward is now contained. That containment strengthens you. You begin to notice how much peace silence brings, how much clarity it provides, how much energy it saves. Instead of scattering your words to someone who doesn't value them, you sit quietly with yourself, and in that stillness you regain power. You discover that silence is not emptiness at all. It is fullness, because it keeps your energy intact. In relationships, silence can often achieve what arguments never can. Arguments may push someone away, but silence makes them come closer, not out of control, but out of curiosity, reflection, and realization. It causes them to see what life feels like without your words, without your attention, without your constant presence. Silence makes them realize how much space you filled, how much effort you gave, how much of yourself you offered. And now that all of that is gone, the silence becomes a teacher, one they cannot ignore. Silence is also timeless. Words fade, but silence lingers. Even long after you've stepped away, the memory of your silence can still echo in their mind. They remember the unanswered messages, the calls you didn't return, the explanations you never gave. That silence stays with them because it is unfinished. It leaves a question mark that time cannot erase. That's why silence is such a powerful response. It doesn't end the conversation, it extends it endlessly in their own mind. The true strength of silence lies in its ability to keep you aligned with yourself. Respect. When you choose silence, you are saying to yourself, I will not lower my standard just to be heard. You remind yourself that peace is more important than winning an argument, that dignity is more valuable than constant explanations, that your worth does not need to be shouted to be real. In silence, you find both protection and power. You find clarity in the absence of noise, strength in the absence of reaction, and dignity in the absence of unnecessary words. When someone is not interested in you, one of the most important realizations you must come to is that your self-worth cannot and should not depend on their validation. It is a dangerous place to be when the measure of your value is tied to how another person treats you, responds to you, or acknowledges you. Human beings are inconsistent, and their emotions can change with circumstances, but your identity and worth cannot be left in the hands of someone who does not even see your value. Self-worth must come from within, from the deep knowing that you are already enough, without needing someone else's attention to prove it. Many people waste years of their life chasing after someone who consistently shows disinterest, hoping that one day their attention will suddenly turn into love. But all that effort drains your spirit and erodes your confidence because you are constantly operating from a place of lack. Real strength comes when you anchor your worth in something unshakable, something that doesn't move when people walk away. The way someone perceives you does not define you. Their rejection is not proof of your inadequacy. More often than not, it simply reflects where they are in their own life, or what they are looking for at that moment, and none of that has the power to diminish who you are. To embrace your self-worth, you must start by shifting the conversation you have with yourself every day. If you are constantly telling yourself that you are not good enough, not attractive enough, or not worthy of being chosen, then you will begin to act in ways that confirm those beliefs. For example, you will tolerate behaviors that are disrespectful. You will accept breadcrumbs of attention, and you will cling to someone who gives you the bare minimum. But if you affirm to yourself that you are valuable, that your presence is a gift, and that you do not need to beg to be seen, then you will naturally carry yourself with confidence, set higher standards, and attract people who recognize your worth without needing to be convinced. That is the secret to drawing better experiences into your life. What you believe about yourself radiates outward and shapes the kind of treatment you allow. This is why embracing self-worth is not about arrogance, but about alignment, about deciding that you will no longer shrink yourself just to fit into someone else's lack of vision. When someone shows disinterest, instead of questioning your entire being, you can look at it from a place of strength, realizing that you deserve someone who doesn't need to be persuaded to appreciate you. The truth is, when you embrace your self-worth, you naturally develop boundaries that protect you from unnecessary pain. Boundaries are not walls that shut people out. They are filters that allow the right kind of people in while keeping out what drains you. Without a strong sense of worth, you may find yourself letting anyone into your life, even those who show clear signs of disregard for your feelings. But when you are rooted in self-worth, you recognize the red flags early, and instead of trying to change someone's mind, you gracefully remove yourself from situations where you are not valued. This is one of the most empowering acts of self-love, and it sends a message not only to others but to yourself. that your time, energy, and heart are too precious to waste. People may try to test your limits, but if you know who you are and what you deserve, you will not compromise. And paradoxically, when you stop chasing those who don't care, you start attracting those who do. This shift happens because you are no longer seeking worth externally. Instead, you carry it internally and it becomes magnetic. Furthermore, embracing self-worth also frees you from comparison, which is one of the greatest thieves of peace. When someone rejects you or loses interest, it is tempting to compare yourself with others and think that they must have something you don't. But comparison blinds you to your unique value and keeps you stuck in a cycle of insecurity. When you truly embrace who you are, you understand that your uniqueness is your strength and no one else can replicate the essence you bring to the table. This realization helps you stop competing for attention and start standing in your authenticity. The more you embrace this truth, the more you realize that rejection is often a form of redirection. What you thought you lost was never meant for you in the first place, and what is truly aligned with your worth will never require you to beg for it. Embracing your self-worth also means taking responsibility for how you show up for yourself daily. It's not only about affirmations or thoughts, it's about action. Do you honor your body by caring for it? Do you invest in your growth by learning, evolving, and stepping into new levels of discipline? Do you surround yourself with people who respect you, or do you cling to toxic environments just to feel less alone? Every decision you make is a reflection of how much you value yourself. When you set high standards in how you live, it becomes nearly impossible to settle for someone's disinterest because your entire life is already full of meaning and purpose. You stop making another person the source of your joy because you have already created joy within yourself. This level of self-worth creates an aura of strength that others can sense immediately, and it makes people either rise to meet your value or walk away because they cannot handle it. And both outcomes are victories for you because you are no longer trapped in uncertainty. Ultimately, self-worth is not a switch you turn on overnight, but it is a muscle you strengthen daily. Every time you choose yourself over chasing someone uninterested, every time you honor your standards instead of lowering them, every time you affirm your value instead of doubting it, you are building that muscle. The more you practice it, the more natural it becomes, and soon rejection no longer destabilizes you but redirects you towards something greater. You begin to understand that the greatest relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. And once that relationship is strong, no outside rejection can break it.